Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 169 with Ben Congleton of OLARC. So I am recording on the road again. Just so funny how it keeps happening to see that I'm out and about during the release of these episodes every other week. So I am currently in Los Angeles for the Times Higher Education Summit. So grateful for the opportunity to moderate a couple of sessions during this event. So I will be here for that, and then looking forward to being currently the thing that's on my calendar next is South by Southwest EDU in March. So hope to see folks either here in LA or in Austin in March. But this episode, a really great episode, talking about live chat and supporting students more dynamically through that resource. And just Ben has a lot of passion and knowledge in this area, so I appreciate him hanging out and sharing that all. Definitely connect with him and the resources from OLARC that we share in the show notes. But without further ado, this is episode number 169 with Ben Congleton. Our topic for today is an interesting one, one that I think a lot about in terms of how we layer student support sort of infrastructures where, you have things out there, chatbots and student support advisors, coaches and things as like the live human beings behind them. But how do we sort of bridge between the two is the conversation that we're getting into today, is kind of balancing the human aspect, automation, live chat, and student support in this increasingly hybrid online digital learning world that we all find ourselves in. So we will start out as we always do, though. We will have our guest introduce themselves briefly and give an overview of their professional background and how they got to be where they are today.
Thanks for having me. My name is Ben Congleton. I'm a CEO and co-founder of OLARC Live Chat. OLARC is a accessible live chat and chatbot platform used by higher ed and thousands of other businesses. We have a really great, strong two-way integration with Slate that we're pretty excited to work on. And we're actually a public benefit corporation around bringing accessible tech out into the workplace, into the world. And maybe we'll talk about that, maybe we won't. But I'll talk a little bit about my background. So I'm a PhD dropout. I attended University of Michigan. I was doing a PhD at their School of Information. And one thing I noticed while doing that program was there really wasn't a great way to communicate with the folks behind websites when you were browsing them. I mean, you could kind of go and chat with like Comcast, but if you were chatting with a small business or just your average institution, there really wasn't a good place to have that connection. Well, I was like on the website in context and browsing around at the same time. And so I kind of set out on this journey to go build a very simple tool to allow anyone to add live chat onto a website, so the folks who were browsing around that website could communicate. And what brings me here is over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of growth in higher ed, and a lot more universities starting to adopt live chat as a way of communicating with students. And I think it's like pretty clear why. Folks aren't really picking up the phone anymore. And Gen Z does not really gravitate towards writing an email. And so what you need to do as an institution is really be there to answer questions and serve those students where they are. And the place where they're at is when they're trying to find information is on your website.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's interesting where in so many ways there's stuff that's sort of like, comes from the business world, or things where like people are familiar with them when they do online shop or do whatever outside of colleges and universities. So it sort of like ripples towards it eventually. So it's not even like this is like a new concept. It's new for institutions investing in it as a part of their strategy to recruit new students and engage their current students and everything. So I think that is interesting where, you've seen that traction happening more with education lately.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the funny thing is when we first started this thing, a lot of our early customers were university libraries or library systems, and they were just super early adopters of this technology. But then the rest of the institution sort of took a while to come around to adopting live chat. And now we're seeing registrars' offices, we're seeing career services, we're seeing enrollment and admissions. And I think, generally speaking, chat and automated chat is just another channel to communicate with folk. And I think the fact that you can chat on a web page and provide that external resource at the same time is a very unique experience that you don't get over, say, SMS messaging, email, or or the phone. Like, because you have that person's attention and they're looking at something at the same time, which is pretty rare in this world where we're all having, a million people try to take our attention at any given moment.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think, yeah, it is important to have something like this. I think, for any instance, like you said, like you're looking for information, and rather than just kind of like going it alone, or you can maybe send out a message into the, universe through like a contact us form. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. Or yeah, like the idea where like, hey, we have a phone number, like call us or whatever. Having that idea where it's like, okay, can I just grab somebody really quick and I'm like looking at this thing and maybe you can see what I'm looking at, or, whatever else. But yeah, there's just so many opportunities there for just sort of like, this will take us just a few moments to fix right here and now versus waiting, much longer than that. So I guess just to make sure we've got kind of the full context though, if you want to explain a little bit about OLARC and kind of what it does exactly, so we kind of have sort of the sandbox that we're playing within.
Yeah, sure. Like in the absolute simplest form, OLARC is a chat box that floats on your website. We can either put automation into that chat box so that we can route and collect information and answer some questions automatically from students, or we can route using that chat box directly to a person. Often, these might be like a work study student or an advisor or someone in the registrar's office or someone in career services, like an actual human on the other end. And we've built a lot of work around that communication platform so that it can integrate into CRMs like Slate, so that it can integrate into analytics packages like Google Analytics and other data sources that you're using to monitor your marketing, and hooking into like other help desk software or Salesforce or TargetX. So you can think of it as sort of like the thing you can put on your website that is a communication channel, but a very intelligent communication channel with a lot of ability to optimize. And so the way I like to look at it is there's a couple of goals that people bring OLARC on for. One goal might be, hey, I'm trying to increase inquiries. Like I want to talk to folk before they're willing to increase that form. So if someone's looking at my school tour online, this is a chance to engage them, let them start talking to an advisor at our school, learn more about them, build a relationship in a way that you might start to get at a college fair, but do that online at scale. Another example might be that I'm trying to reduce cost. Like I have a call center. Students in my call center, when folks call into my call center, the cost of handling call is X. Well, with chat, each person can handle multiple calls at the same time. You get some concurrency, so you could almost double or triple your call center capacity without hiring any additional folk, just by moving to chat. Another problem that sometimes is solved is just facilitating a process. So, for example, University of Oregon has learned that once people are registered and set up for housing, they're going to show up and they're going to get their deposit in. And so they deployed OLARC as part of their admissions process, but also in their like RA and resident life program around housing, just to facilitate and kind of streamline that funnel of helping people get all their housing set up to show up on campus.
Yeah, and I know as somebody who used to work in residence life, that idea of like, yeah, like that, coming to campus or like kind of getting all that secured and guaranteed is going to make you a little bit more sticky. And then that kind of inherent within all that is going to be like a lot of question, like, and then if you can set something up that, you're going to get all those frequently asked questions, it can set up to automate that, and people are, less anxious and they're well prepared. And yeah, just it's going to help everybody out for sure. So, and I guess just, there's a couple things that kind of stuck out because we kind of just were moving forward in our questions here, but like, I want to try to find like the clear sort of like thread of the origin story. I mean, you're like PhD dropout and, all these different things like that obviously like led your life to this moment, but like why Olark? Like why this? Like what sort of inspired? Because I know sometimes there's always just the sort of anecdote of like, oh, I scratched my own itch, or those sort of things. Like what was that sort of like inspiration, if you had kind of that like light bulb moment maybe to
Oh
get
yeah,
started
for
on this
sure.
adventure? Yeah.
And that's such a great question. I get asked this question a lot. My challenge is trying to condense that answer into something that's reasonably short, but I'll do my best. So in high school, I started a web hosting company, and this was 1998. And in 1998, I did not have a cell phone. I needed some way to be able to communicate with the customers that were using our software, using our web hosting company. And live chat turned out to be an incredibly powerful tool. People would come to our website, we'd be able to chat with them, build trust, and they would buy it from high school students with this web hosting company we were building. That piece of software ended up getting bought by a like kind of Fortune 500 targeted live chat company called LivePerson, and they got rid of all their SMB products and just tried to sell it into like Comcast and banks. And they made a lot more money that way, but it really caused this little web hosting company founded by high school students to get stuck with software that wasn't any good. And so fast forward 10 years after that experience in high school, I was doing my PhD at the University of Michigan, and I'd looked around on the internet and was wondering, what's going on with chat? How have things changed since 10 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And I looked around and it seemed like not a lot had changed. It was still the same, like 4 or 5 vendors from, the early 2000s. Most of the folks using live chat were all big institutions. And so I set out with a couple of friends to see if we could prototype something that we would have wanted to use 10 years prior. Because, now we learned a lot more about programming, understand business better, and just wanted to see if something would work and see if that would help more businesses be able to communicate with their customers. And it was kind of amazing. Like we launched this free product just as a side project. It started picking up steam. Originally it was called Habla, HAB.LA, which means to talk in Spanish. But turns out not a lot of English speakers necessarily know how to spell Habla or pronounce it correctly. And so we didn't own the .com domain name. So we kind of came up with the name Olark, and that's another entire story. But basically it started growing and it kind of got to the point where there's all these folks that were just used to looking at their websites through the views of analytics and graphs. And they started being able to look at them through relationships and connection with people. And that's really been kind of the heart of what gets me excited about this area. And one thing we've done more recently around this space is we've had a couple of customers over time like really push us around accessibility. There's a big company in Redmond, Washington that uses us a little bit. And they have very strict accessibility guidelines. They're one of the first customers to really be very vocal about accessibility. And we had some folks on our team that were very passionate about that. And so over time, we ended up building up this culture where it was like, yes, we want everyone to be able to add chat and communicate with people, but we really mean everyone. And so we've put so much effort into making that chat box accessible in a way that I don't think we had realized that what we were doing was that special until I was at CSUN last year, and some folks from Intuit were giving a talk about how to build accessible chat boxes, and they were mentioning us up on stage, and we were just like, "Wow, I guess we're doing something right." And it was, I don't know, it's kind of cool to just kind of do something and then have someone else tell you you're doing a good job, and always be like super nervous and anxious about whether you're doing a good enough job or not. I think I'm always coming from the nervous and anxious side, where until I have a bunch of users telling me we did a good job, like I really don't know. Like I'm a very much user validated person. I don't know. That's kind of a long rambly answer to your question, but
No,
hopefully
no,
it shed
yeah,
some color in how
yeah.
we started this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. All kind of connects and everything. And appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it's like its own podcast to just have everybody answer, like, how did you come up with your company's name? Because they usually are just like, random mashup of letters that's sort of like, yeah, easy to search because it just is spelt like it's, kind of phonetically said and everything. But
Yeah.
um, uh, so yeah, I mean, so that's great. Yeah, so that kind of brings us more towards today, where yeah, you're working in this space with institutions, setting up the live chat and automated chat and everything. But sort of to start at sort of the 30,000 feet view, and we'll start to kind of zoom in. Um, like I said, there's just been this massive shift towards completely online or hybrid learning for students. So um, what do you see as the impact on student support given this shift? Because obviously, maybe you're working with students who are on campus or only on campus some of the time, or completely online, and those sort of things. But you still need to be able to, give each of those students the same high quality support and everything. So, what do you see as sort of the impacts happening in this space right now?
Well, I think it's a big challenge because it's not just adopting tech. There's adopting internal workflow and process changes.
Hmm.
And so, uh, those are the things that take time. Like buying new software is pretty easy, but changing practices so that someone can come in and, answer a chat or get like an IT trouble ticket sorted out. Like an example might be, so one of our customers is Berkeley, and Berkeley uses us for their kind of academic educational support, kind of like an internal IT department to support classroom technology. And so you can go in and use chat to ask your question if your projector is messed up, or if you're uh, having your uh, course challenges with your courseware, et cetera. And uh, it's like a really interesting challenge, because even just to sort of adopt that and get that rolled out requires like a bunch of internal process change for how their ed tech team runs. And so I think that's really the challenge. So the challenge is really about rethinking the way that your support teams work and operate, and then modeling them more around either online first or online also, because so many of these systems are built around folks being able to walk into an office and get something done. Like imagine like a registrar's office and printing out transcripts. And some of these processes have gotten more efficient over time at some institutions where they've invested in IT. But I think we're seeing, COVID, I think, was a rude awakening for a lot of those systems and processes for the folks that were able to, especially at smaller schools, uh, where they really didn't have as much digital process in place. And so now they're trying to retrofit that kind of online first or online also model into how they provide service. And I think that is it's a challenge and requires real leadership, because institutional change is hard in any form of institution. And higher ed often takes like a very uh, long view about investments in technology and directions to go. And sometimes by taking that long view, you might be unwilling to make some of the small changes to help you learn more about the direction where you're trying to go. So we've seen some institutions, like an easy anecdote on my side is I've seen some institutions take, like a year to go implement some form of chat. And I've seen other institutions willing to run experiments in 2 weeks after the contract's signed.
Hmm.
And I think that type of change management and willingness to experiment, uh, especially around internal process and allocation of resources, is the thing that really hangs up certain institutions on making forward progress.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, yeah, anymore just in this kind of day and age of ed tech, there's, depending on what your problem is, there's going to be a lot of solutions out there, and um, you know,
what I think a lot about is that, like, okay, you've got a lot of options. So there's probably going to be something out there that fits your needs. So like you said, that's kind of like the easy part. So then when you get into implementation and utilization and the processes and everything, like that really is where the rubber meets the road. And we're actually going to say like, okay, this is how we're doing things. We're going to keep people honest and sort of try to, nudge people back in line, to make sure that things are happening the way that they are, or, the way that they need to be. And yeah, that's going to be sort of the most important thing. And um I feel like I see that being where things will fail most often, and maybe just like the places where they don't have the perspective to um take the time necessary for that, and even to kind of like iterate on it, not just sort of like stall out if you hit sort of friction points. But you know it is kind of the balance where it's like, yeah, you don't need to like have a super quick turnaround like the 2 week one, nor does it need to be like a year necessarily, like, but give it its due, build kind of your coalition and build some consensus, and have everybody providing input and kind of mutual agreement on things. So um yeah, it's really interesting point you make there. And I think that is the idea where like everybody's going to be making these decisions in the realm of student support. And, you can kind of just have the laundry list of all the things that help students to be successful when they're at college. But that sort of impact is definitely something sort of behind the scenes that's at play here. So um, definitely,
And
definitely
I think
worth
like org
noting.
structure plays into this a bunch.
Hmm.
And, this may not be like the best example, but if you think about like one of my, after kind of moving into selling more in the higher ed, and my dad's a professor, my sister's a professor, my brother-in-law's a professor, and I'm a PhD dropout. So for me, like going into higher ed, it's kind of like going home for Thanksgiving. Like it feels very familiar. And what I've realized is how many different organizational structures there are within higher ed. It almost seems like every single college or university has sort of a different approach. And one thing you might, an anecdote might be is like, does your cabinet have a marketer on it? Like either in a CMO capacity or like a VP of marketing, um, or is marketing spread out across every group inside of your university? Maybe there's like a small enrollment marketing team, or like some brand marketing teams, or a team that's working on donations and alumni outreach. And, there's pros and cons of each approach, but that's like one very simple example of how organizational structures, either lead you towards more centralization and shared resources, or uh, like sort of spread those resources out across different departments. And and how does decision making work within those situations? How does a strategic initiative get pushed through? And I think, at least on our side, we've seen the folks that are the most willing to experiment, the most willing to think strategically, are the folks on the enrollment marketing teams, the guys who have a job of kind of bringing in enrollment, boosting enrollment, creating more inquiries, and have budget backing that up. Because as we move to digital, we're also, that's one trend that's going on. Another trend that's going on, it's a demographic shift based on lower birth rates in 2008. And so there's a lot of folks that are trying to prepare for that moment. That requires making sure your enrollment numbers stay up. And I think those are folks that have a little bit of fire under them to go try some things, run some experiments, and see what works. And during COVID, I think that level of experimentation and that level of like, hey, just go try things, was really accelerated a bunch too. And I think part of the challenge is, as we move towards, I don't know if I want to call it post COVID, but maybe like with COVID, or like sort of like we got it figured out with COVID a little
Hmm.
bit more than we did before, to kind of hold on to some of that experimental mindset and that get that thing done mindset, and do it in such a way that doesn't burn out employees. Because like educators had a pretty rough couple of years, especially K through 12, but even admin staff and higher ed and folks that were trying to run online, hybrid, and in-person classes all at the same time. Some institutions ask educators to do that.
Hmm.
Others didn't, but it's been certainly for the admin staff and the student services folk and all those people. There's a lot happening over the last couple of years.
Indeed, there was, and I think I think that's definitely like an important takeaway is that like to keep that mindset to kind of again continuously improve and adapt to the needs of your students. So I think that's kind of like the impact on student support here is that like the needs are going to change, and I think there's going to be that much more focus on student support and retention as enrollment declines potentially continue. So what tools are we putting in place to be more accessible to them, be more responsive, and all that. So, on this topic, I think it's really kind of the core of what I wanted to talk about with you is like, working in this space, like what do you see as the balance between automation and live support? Because I think, some people might conflate the two, or they see them as like two completely separate, distinct things that have no overlap.
I think that I love that question because I think what we've noticed broadly is over the last couple of years, prior to the last couple of years, we were more or less referred to as a live chat company. We provide a way of connecting with a human on your website. Over the last, we'll call it 3 odd years, people sometimes referred to us as a chatbot company, even when they want to connect to a live human being. And so there is some like conflation in how people are using those terms. The way I like to think about it is, what's your goal? So start with a goal. And we actually built out a checklist in terms of like how to think about higher ed. I think it's olark.com/higheredgeek is the URL that'll let you go find that. So olark.com/higheredgeek. And it really starts with what's your goal. It's not about automation. It's not about live support. It's about what's your goal. Are you trying to increase inquiries? Are you trying to increase relationships? Are you trying to compete with some of the other schools that are out there? Or are you trying to drive costs down? Are you trying to reduce cost of handling student inquiries? And I think that in an idealized world, like throw out cost, right? If you can get rid of costs as part of your equation, you would have like a 1-to-1 educator to student ratio or higher, a 1-to-1 student services to student ratio. And you would try to build the strongest relationships you possibly could and set everyone up to this like long-term success based on the strongest relationship that you could figure out how to build. That's the idealized case. Obviously that's impossible to do that. But so what you're trying to do is find some place between that idealized case of very strong relationships with everyone who's potentially interested in your institution and like, here's Google, good luck, right? Those are the two places. Or like, oh, we're Comcast or Bank of America, or we're this giant faceless institution that's basically trying to drive cost all the way down. And I think that the challenge for a marketer or for a higher ed professional is to try to thread that needle of finding that point on that line that is the best place for them to compete and be personalized. If you're a community college, you may need to really drive down cost. You may be primarily focused on reducing human interaction, and that could be okay because most of the students that attend you are a captive audience. You're priced very competitively versus other institutions, and service may not really be at the top of your list. But if you're a private school or in a competitive public area with a couple of public schools in it, if there's any competition at all, I think you have to make some decisions around where do we want to invest our resources to build those relationships and where do we want to automate. And there's a variety of different philosophies around that. The philosophy that I like to think about is, at the front of the funnel, this is a chance for you to really stand out from your competition. Choosing a school is one of the most important decisions that a lot of young students go through. And there's so many questions that they have, so many questions their parents have. This is a really good opportunity to start things off on the right foot and really help people make that decision and choose what's best for them. Once someone shows up at the school, you have a variety of other support techniques and methods. Maybe now you can kind of relax that investment a little bit. Think of it more of like, we have advisor roles, we have career counseling, we have different kind of advisory services that are probably a little bit less intense than, the types of interactions that our admissions counselors have with students. And so maybe that's a place where you can invest more in automation. Registrar's offices, more automation. In general, I like to think, put the money into building relationships as much as you possibly can. And where you can't, and there's a cost trade-off, try to create that efficiency. So, welcome centers are a great example of places where they often have staffed phone people that are on the phone to kind of help out with that on-campus onboarding experience, more or less, and the tour system, the tour process as well. That's a great place to invest in efficiency gains. And then when you run out of efficiency gains from, say, like moving from phone to chat, then start adding automation to gain even more efficiency. But anytime you add automation, there is that trade-off of, you're losing opportunities to build relationships. And I think that a lot of folk know that, but it's helpful to like hear it said when there's so many people trying to sell more or less pure automation and kind of outsource that opportunity for relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to sort of look at it. And, I think that, they're kind of like, can be maybe like symbiotic on each other too. Like if you have like automation set up, obviously it's screening out a lot of kind of routine, sort of repeated questions, but then it's serving up opportunities for that, human engagement, where there's sort of something more complex and question can be answered and done in a way that's, a little bit more of a kind of a warm way. But yeah, like there's just places where it's better suited. And, as you have unique questions come up, it's like, well, how can we build this into the knowledge base, of an automated chat feature. So, but also try to think through like, well, I mean, this is something that like is just going to end up with a person anyway. Like if we could just get them the help they need as quick as possible, like get you in touch with the person who's going to be able to give you the best service. Yeah.
A lot of it comes back to the goal. Mm-hmm. So like if your goal is pure efficiency, then automation is going to be your key metric. Like how much can you automate? How can you build that question bank? How can you eliminate human interaction? If your goal is relationships, there may be certain kinds of questions you get all the time that often lead to larger conversations. So you might be able to like, answer a question like, when is move-in date, right? With an automatic response. Or like, when are applications due, with an automatic response. But the folk that are asking those questions might actually be people that you would benefit from asking a follow-up question to, as opposed to just having them learn the answer and walk away. And you can think about this a little bit strategically. And that's why I like to bring it back to goal. And like you said, you have a fixed amount of staff and you're trying to optimize the use of that staff to, in my case, often like build the strongest relationships you can. So where automation really comes in and is helpful is freeing up staff time to be more focused on the folks where you want to invest. And I think that varies. It could be you want to invest the most in the most complicated questions. It could be that you want to invest the most in folks that are kind of at the inquiry stage before they've chosen to apply. It could be that you want to invest the most resources in making sure the folks that start applying finish their applications. There's so many different ways of kind of looking at how to strategically use chat, because it's in context on page, with a more or less a funnel that you're trying to move someone through, a conversion funnel that you're trying to move someone through. And this is the kind of stuff we've done in B2B, in e-commerce, and all these other industries for a long time. And it's been fun to work with enrollment marketers and VPs of enrollment and admissions teams to think about these types of problems.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I just love talking about this stuff because I think it's such a perfect kind of unison of, the human element with technology and how can they kind of better support each other in sort of the institutional goal of, supporting students and everything, and not entirely replacing humans, but just having their time spent in the best places. And I think, like there's just going to be those things where in any parts of our life, it's nice just to do something like self-service, like just go to the ACM.
Yeah.
But then also like, if you have something more complex, it's like, well, I kind of want to just go directly to a person. So it's like, you might also want to set up where it's like, okay, yeah, you just go to a website. You want to schedule a call with your coach, like, or whatever, like you can do that too. But, just giving those options. Cause I think that's for any of us. I think we could also have those frustrations where it's like, you're trying to call in and you have to like jump through so many hoops to even like get towards any potential solution. If you know that it's like, I'm pretty sure I need to talk to somebody, like I don't think that a like automated voice recognition system is really going to be able to help me out here. So and like you said, there's a sort of like massive global corporations that are like, yeah, we're gonna like put you through the ringer because we are just trying to like squeeze all of the efficiency out of this system here. So I think those are kind of good examples for folks if they reflect on their own experiences trying to get support. It's like, okay, well then like, how are we looking at how students are going through their own, experience with our institution and,
Yeah. And like,
again, think
are we
about your
taking
goals.
a long-term view or a short-term view is also interesting to think about, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're Comcast for the sake of, basically they're a monopoly, right? So they're allowed to have really bad service, I guess. But I think that most folks have kind of a bad taste in their mouth when they think about dealing with Comcast service. And I
Mm-hmm.
think they've more recently invested in trying to fix that because of that distaste. And I don't think that anyone in higher ed really has that luxury. Like I think there's many institutions, students have tons of choices, and efficiency can't be the primary goal.
Mm-hmm. Definitely agree. As we're wrapping up, I feel like there's definitely like kind of some momentum here or, just sort of a renewed focus on like, how are we sort of, becoming more kind of digital first in supporting our kind of myriad of students, your adult working hybrid, learners and everything like these students who, kind of really need to have a more dynamic support environment. What's really exciting you about your work with universities moving forward right now?
That's a good question. And my answer is going to be probably a little bit weird. I think the thing that excites me most about working with higher ed is that that we share a lot of the same values and a lot of the same ways we look at things like accessibility, for example. So OLARC is, I think I mentioned before, we're a public benefit corporation. We're focused on bringing more accessible tech. And part of the reason I love working with higher ed is because they're not just trying to like check the box on accessibility. Like people actually care in that
Mm-hmm.
industry. And what that allows us to do from a product roadmap standpoint is work with folks like Gallaudet and prioritize like American Sign Language support for escalating chats into video calls, and have that align well with our mission to bring more accessible tech. So I think like broadly, that's what I love about higher ed. I love that we can be mission oriented, have that set of shared values, and work towards that same ideal of building communication software that's accessible to everyone. I think beyond that, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to help. I think that we're kind of in the early days for higher ed adoption of communication software. I mean, I think there's plenty of vendors out there, but I think that many of these vendors have kind of only been selling into higher ed institutions. And so I think there's this really great opportunity to bring the learnings that we've had being out there, working with anywhere from like small e-commerce websites to big, Fortune 500 companies to, institutions that have been using us for many years, and sharing those lessons with folks that are just getting their feet wet and trying to get stuff off the ground. And that to me is very exciting because I think, when you're working in a big institution, it's so easy to hear no. And it's so easy to hear like, we don't have budget. And I think that our insight from some working at scale has really helped us figure out how to unblock and move progress forward and help people run experiments. And I don't know, there's one thing I'm excited about. It's like figuring out how to rather than say no, figure out how to say, let's try this out and see how it works. Because I think that when you start trying things out, not everything is going to work, but you're going to learn something and it's going to help you try again and do a better job of it. And so I think there's tons of room to do that in higher ed. And I don't know, that's one of my favorite things to do.
Well, I appreciate that sentiment a lot. And yeah, just glad having folks like you doing this work and everything. And I think, definitely an exciting time. So I think that'll hopefully be an increasing wave across the board is how can we make sure that we have everything set up in a way that's as accessible as possible, even in the sense of like just sort of the archetypal student that we're going to see a lot more of, but also just the differing needs to accommodate, students, like you said, like, integrating ASL, recognition or anything into a platform like this. So I know you had mentioned already the checklist, which we will absolutely share out in the show notes as usual for folks to check out. I think that it will be a really great tool, but any other resources to share on this topic, books, articles, podcasts, or anything else that comes to mind that we can also include in the show notes?
I mean, obviously you can go to olark.com and read a lot. We have case studies of many institutions. You could follow us on LinkedIn. We've recently been doing kind of like a broadly educational webinar series. I think some of those things will be recorded and you can go request, because I'm not sure exactly when this airs. I think that series is going to end in November. So depending on the dates, maybe too late for this series, but I think we'll have more. I personally like reading Simpson Scarborough's a blog. I think they have a lot of good insight in this place. Now, obviously, the Chronicle and a variety of different higher ed publications that are always a good resource. The Enrollify podcast has some good advice from smart people on it. There's really like plenty to learn out here. I think if I was trying to go from 0 to 1, I think looking at this, our higher ed checklist is a kind of a pretty reasonable way to start. I think it helps you really frame it around goals and not around like, oh, we need live chat, but more like, what are we trying to accomplish here? Which I think, many kind of support or student support oriented folk tend towards like, oh, we need this so we can support. And I like to reframe as like, we need this so we can accomplish something.
Yeah, such some greatest hits on there, of course, the big publications out there in the field. But we'll share out links to all the stuff that you mentioned, which is always helpful. And it's just always like asking about resources. Just cool to see like where there's overlap or other things that are like, well, people have mentioned that a lot. Maybe I'll have to go check it out. But we will wrap up though with our usual final question, having you, our guest, share your final thought or call to action on this topic to end the episode.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Dustin, for having me on. It's been super fun. I love answering these kinds of questions, and I love talking about this stuff too. So if you heard anything in this podcast that you think is interesting to you or you want to dive more into, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. You can email me directly, ben@olark.com. You can drop by olark.com and chat with someone and just ask for me. I am very much more of a product person. I love talking about products and solving problems, and happy to noodle on anything that you're dealing with.
Perfect. Yeah, I appreciate that so much. Kind of refreshing that you make yourself available in that way. We'll close it there. Just thank you so much, Ben, for hanging out and sharing all that you did. And we'll have ways to connect with you and stuff you mentioned and Olark and all that good stuff in the show notes as usual. But again, just appreciate you and your team doing this work, and just a great chatting with you.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Dustin.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.